Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Hey there, mellow gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. Today in the studio, I have a very special guest. Can't even talk. Iona Phillips.
It's Ilona.
Ilona. Yeah, see, I knew I was going to mess something up.
Tricky one, right?
It is. It is. It is. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and really looking forward to talking with you.
So let's just jump right in. I'll get you to introduce yourself and all your credentials and what you do.
Sure. So I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a group practice owner in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I do a lot of things, clinical work, administrative work, obviously running the practice. But one of my specialty areas when it comes to clinical work are definitely eating disorders, also addictions and anxiety disorders. So that's why I'm excited to be here, because that is very much your forte.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know we're a whole bunch of fun around here. We can't just have one thing. We got to have them all. Mm-hmm. So you work mainly with parents and teenagers?
Yeah. So it's actually a great question. I predominantly actually work with adults, so 18 and up. Okay. Big part of my work over the last quarter of a century has been actually working with college students in particular, but also obviously adults beyond college. And so we don't directly work with kids per se, but I do work a lot with parents who are trying to help their kids with eating disorders. And that's sort of, that's a big difference in some ways, right? When you're working with adults with eating disorders, I mean, obviously you want to draw on their supports, but that sometimes includes families and sometimes not. Whereas with the children, the families or caregivers have such an incredible power, right, to help their children if they have the right tools.
Right. So, and I've heard this a lot of parents talking about when their kids go to college, university, mm-hmm. That's, if there was a little inkling of an eating disorder before, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Yeah.
Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, oftentimes it can be, coming to college obviously is a time of a lot of transition, right? The kids mm-hmm. are really figuring out a lot of different things, not just academics. They're figuring out, how do I live with roommates? How do I cook my food? How do I do my laundry? I mean, we have had some kids come pretty independent and have done a lot of things, and some kids literally don't know how to do their laundry, right? So there's a lot of adjustment, a lot of stress. And, I for me, it's University of Michigan. And so we have a lot of very talented and bright kids who, some of them were sort of a big fish in a small pond, and then they come to U of M and they're sort of a small fish in a really big pond of a lot of really gifted kids. So again, there are so many layers of stress and transition, and it doesn't help, right? That diet culture permeates a lot of different things, including, the fear of freshman 15, and we're just like fueling it left and right. You pick.
Right. And so, and I've seen this a lot too, like for the people that I've talked to. I didn't go to university, or you can tell by the way I talk, but School of Hard Knocks, that's where I went. Uh-huh. any of their children with an athletic scholarship, something with like really high pressure, like that, I'm flabbergasted on how much pressure these kids are under. Like if they're on a scholarship, like they have to keep their grades up, they have to be best on the team, they have, like, there's just so much. I can see how one would break, not just going to it like an eating disorder, but all the other fun stuff that's out there too, right?
And so absolutely, you're so right. And I'm also delighted though to say that we have also come a long way, right? So these days, we also have coaches, and I think of it even the Greek system, right? Like, who are so much more familiar with eating issues. And, on the University of Michigan campus, we have actually within the Department of Athletics, a phenomenal eating disorder non-diet dietitian, right? So they are prepared. Like so it depends. It depends where you find yourself at. We have come a long way. Some places and some people still have a way to go in terms of how they can be helpful and not harmful when dealing with these youngsters.
Well, way to go, University of Michigan. Holy cow, that's amazing. Like, I'm impressed. Because actually, I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and they were talking about how come in school, like say we're elementary school, how come they don't teach about eating disorders there? And I can tell you why in Canada that they don't, but America's different. Would you
I would love to hear why not in Canada. My sister actually lived for a while in Vancouver, a beautiful, beautiful place. But I do know, right, that the healthcare system and a lot of things are very different. Unfortunately, in American schools and on the elementary and middle school level, you sometimes have people even filling in for these wellness classes. And that is often where eating disorders start for kids, right? Because someone was teaching them about how to lose weight and sort of teaching the dichotomy of good, bad foods. And so it is still very maddening. Again, we are making progress. Some schools are better than others, but we can also do a lot of harm, actually. Kids are paying attention, right?
Well, and I don't speak for the school system of Canada, so I'll make that clear. But I do know that it is even just difficult having conversations around sex, right? Parents flip out. You're going to talk about eating disorders, parents are going to flip out, right? You're going to always have some pushback. And I think everyone just tries to stay level. Yeah. And then I've been told too, like from people who have had talks with teachers telling them about eating disorders, they're like, oh, well, that gave me ideas. And then they heard that one, they're like, oh, now we don't want to talk about it, so we don't want to give anyone ideas. Right?
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I'm going to diverge just for a minute, if you indulge me. That reminds me of the conversations that we have. When I worked at the University of Michigan directly, we would do suicide prevention programming, right? And people often said, but if I talk about it, if I ask them, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? Am I planting seeds? You could not be further from the truth. Actually, not asking, not paying attention, not talking with them is actually the worst thing you can do. So that's my answer here. Not talking about it is the worst thing that we can do. But I know you get it.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I just understand the pushback, right? And then funding cuts and all that stuff, right?
Sure.
Right? Like I don't know if there's ever a perfect answer other than if you have kids, then be open and honest about them. Make sure they're able to come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, open communication is everything, although I will say with teens, because I do have teens, it is harder. So I rely heavily on car rides, because when they're in a back seat, somehow they are a lot more open. So you got to find your way, and, every family works differently, and you got to find your own comfort level. But you bet I'm talking about whether it's eating disorders, whether it's sex, everything goes.
Yeah, no. Not everyone is. I have teenage boys, and I always say, well, I'm glad I didn't have girls because trust me, another one of me, no thank you. But not saying that boys wouldn't get it though, because I have a son that's on a football team, right? So do you see a lot of boys in your?
Yeah, so we definitely, that's I have talked about this many places, that eating disorders used to have sort of this rep of like, it's a disorder of white privileged girls, and that nothing could be further from the truth these days. I mean, we see so much diversity in terms of gender, race, and ethnicity. I do think that folks who identify as men, who are biologically men, deal with some additional stigma and pressure, right? Because of that. I mean, right, you may hear folks say, I mean, you're a boy, why would you don't have an eating disorder. And again, that's the perfect way to shut someone down. I think it does present differently, right? And again, I don't ever want to speak about a population as a monolith. There is so much variation. But in boys, it can present sort of as being masculine and being cut. Not always about thinness necessarily. Although when you look at the LGBTQIA community, there's sometimes drive for thinness amongst gay men. Again, it depends. So definitely plenty of diversity. And we just have to be aware what kind of stigma, right, that can carry.
Do you think with the rise of social media that eating disorders, whatever one, I'm not just saying bulimia, anorexia, orthorexia. My cousin was a bodybuilder. He calls it reverse anorexia, right? It's still some sort of addiction, right?
Sure.
Do you see a rise on that because of social media?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. And we know that. I mean, the data is here. We know how social media operates, right? We have seen the documentaries of how social media targets us adults, all the worst children with developing brains. Yeah, social media could do a lot of good, but it just depends who you follow, right? If you follow non-diet dietitians, if you follow, body acceptance and whatever, great. I could have a really positive impact, but it can also go the very opposite way.
Yeah, and it does seem that, because like I'm guilty of, the social media stuff. And it does seem every time I turn it on, I love how you say non-diet dietitians. Everyone's an expert now. Listen to how I lost over XYZ, right? And I'm like, okay. And then the fad dieting too, with I would, like back in the 2000s, it was like Atkins, and now it's keto, and now it's protein. Like I've never eat, like, are we in caveman days? Like, God, are you going to eat a whole I've never seen people eat so much protein in their life.
Right. Now we are more Ozempic, and yeah, it's always something. It's billions of dollars. It's a big money machine.
Well, billions of dollars. So let's speak about that. So for parents trying to get their kids into treatment, I can't believe, like the money.
Sure. Yeah, our system is pretty broken. I will say, so my background, actually, I come from socialized medicine, and, Canadian system is more closer to that. It has its downfalls too. I know my sister got very ill while in Canada and couldn't get even basic assessment for months and months. So, I don't think that anyone has really figured it out. But yeah, as a provider, right, the frustration is we have lack of solid treatment providers, residential treatments. Insurance companies don't often cover it. If they do, the rates are often abysmal. So, many clinicians will choose to not take insurance. We do. We take several insurance panels, but I can absolutely understand how that's also not really livable. And so we have a really broken system that, I could go on and on about how we could fix that, but that's for another day.
Yeah, no, I fell through every crack known to man here. So I'm not going to say Canada's the be all end all by any means, but I have the gift too. So, when kids, is it because, like, do you think with treatment centers, is it because, do you feel like not enough people are educated on eating disorders and how to diagnose an eating disorder?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that is the primary drive behind the work I do, and sort of getting the awareness out there, right? Um, Parents don't know how to spot, early warning signs and or what to do later, but we have medical providers who do not. I mean, they listen, even in for me, and I'm in mental health, like there was no specialized eating disorder education. Like that's all that I acquired later on in life, supervisors, specialization. The same goes for medicine, like doctors, medical doctors. They don't have it as part of their education. Not to mention, right, that we have fat phobia permeating our medical system. And so I have often talked about things like with anorexia, right? You may have someone who has hyperlipidemia, high cholesterol, and it's actually because they're anorexic. And you might have physicians who will say, "Oh, you got to cut out the high fat foods." That's exactly the opposite of what we want when we are refeeding kids, right? So yeah, it's the level of education that is lacking is really, really troubling and frustrating. Again, right? We're getting better at it. We're getting the word out there. Every one of us can do our little piece, but as a whole, we have ways to go.
So, when would you say parents should worry with their kids, right? So, because I was like, you knew I was sick. Well, you looked at me, you knew. Everyone knew. Um, but there are a lot of people who I talk with who are in that they're not sick enough, right? That's the term that they use. They look perfectly normal, maybe even if you did the crappy BMI, even higher than what
Sure.
they should be. And
Sure.
their doctor looks at and says, no, you're fine, but they're not, right?
Right.
And parents can, well, you look at someone every day, you don't really notice when someone's losing 5, 10, 15 pounds. It normally takes, a good chunk when you see someone every day that you notice, right? And kids wear baggy clothes and all
Yep.
that stuff, right? And can hide it.
Yeah.
What would you tell parents, like, this is the time, like, we need to get on this now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think what's really important, again, is to reemphasize what you're kind of saying, right? That sure, I mean, it sounds like you probably had anorexia, right? But it's a whole spectrum of eating disorders. And we also have folks with what we call atypical anorexia, which on its own is a problematic term, because you may have people who are starving themselves, but just because they don't look emaciated, people may not be concerned, and yet they're super malnourished, right? You can also have people with binge eating disorder who are malnourished. And so you are right, as the support system that lives around them, right? Like I would pay attention to changes in behavior. How are they eating? So if we go even in generalities, right? Is your kid eating 3 times a day, 3 meals, 2 to 3 snacks, right? Are there any changes in their behavior in general? Are they isolating? Are they going to the bathroom after every meal? Are they playing with their food on the plate, right? So it depends. I mean, then we have RFID, right, which is going to be more specific to textures and food. So for parents, I always say or caregivers, right, I say, trust your gut, notice differences, notice changes in behavior, right? That's number one. And I would not listen to a doctor who will say, and it's the sad part, right, that we have to self-advocate. We often defer to the white coat as sort of the expert, but they're not really an expert on your child. They are not with your child 24/7. And so, I mean, if someone really argues with you when you're presenting these concerning changes, if you provide a list to them and they're arguing that, then maybe it's time for a different physician or provider, whomever they are, right? So if it's a food concern, then have it assessed by an eating disorder specialist, right? Whether it's a nutritionist or a therapist or a physician, if you're lucky enough to actually have a physician nearby who specializes in this, have them assess it. Yeah, I feel like, tell me if you have more questions, right? Because changes in behavior could be so many things. Are they sleeping more? Again, are they withdrawing, right? Are they more tired? Are they actually all over the place? Are there mood swings? Like any changes, like let's figure out why that's here. And maybe it is because of food. Maybe there's something else going on, right? But that, and then again, can open up that door for communication. And if I say, well, I'm concerned about you because you look like this, that's a lot harder to sort of argue. But if I say what I am noticing, right, in your behaviors is this: you have now skipped blah, 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 or you now don't come out of your room, or, right, that's hard to argue when you're presenting behavioral facts. And hopefully it again opens the line of communication. And if it's not you, then find someone that your kid trusts and would open up to more than the parent. And sometimes that's the case.
So let's talk about you and your facility. So let's say I'm coming to you. What is the first steps with you?
Are you coming as an adult?
We'll start with the kids, and then we'll start as an adult. We'll do two different scenarios.
So I generally don't work with the kids all that much. I mean, sometimes they may join the session, but I literally coach parents on what to do, right? And what to do within family-based treatment. So this is how that eating disorder is impacting your kids. So there's some basic education. I have a course on this. So if you go to ilunaphillips.com, you will see my course. It's the Empowered Care Program. So it's all the logistics, right? We go through, these are the signs. This is what's going on with your kid. This is the medical workup that you need to take to your physician to do all this blood work, the heart function, all of these things. And then we talk about how do you refeed your kid. And so with the children, you don't necessarily always need a nutritionist, unlike with the adults. And I heard you talk about on your other episodes, refeeding can take thousands and thousands of calories. So it's more figuring out how do I get it and what are the meals? So like I have a freebie on my website, even sort of for like some ideas around meals, high density meals. So that's what we do. And from there on, we just coach, right? And so the parents then go home and they try to sort of implement it. And of course, we know, especially with anorexia, that there can be a lot of resistance, sometimes even violence. So, we assess session to session. Certainly, if they are alarming physical symptoms, it might come to hospitalization, residential treatment, all of that. But if the parents are able to manage and follow family-based treatment at home, then I'm sort of just serving as a coach, sort of troubleshooting, right? How to use leverage, what really would work with their children, so that it's effective. And when I work with adults coming in with an eating disorder, I'll just do an assessment, right? Tell me the history. How did it show up? How does it show up now? How does it impact your life? What do you want? What are your values? Values is a big piece of my work, to sort of tap into what is important to that person to help us consistently drive recovery, because that's hard work. And that's it in a nutshell, but I'm happy to sort of like elaborate more in detail if you'd like.
Yeah, no, because I'd like to know, like, how do you get someone, because I know for me, you're in denial, queen of denial, right? No, I'm fine. Everyone else got the problem, right? And how do you get someone to open up to you? Because I like to talk, but not about me.
What age did you seek treatment?
Oh, this was like 2 years ago. I was 44.
Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting. As you know, in anorexia, we have something, anosognosia, right? As a symptom of anorexia where you don't know actually how sick you are. So even when you say queen of denial, I can put a medical term on that. Like, we know that you're actually not realizing just how ill you are. And so that's step number one, is we gotta renourish that brain, because I can't help you, right? It's sort of like if someone is coming high to my sessions, I can be throwing my, psycho whatever at them, and they're not going to really take that in. They're high, right? And so it's the same thing. When the brain is malnourished, I could be giving you all kinds of tools, but they're not going to take. They're just not going to take. This is not a personal sort of flaw or failure. It's just the brain is not able to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, I absolutely work in a tandem with an eating disorder nutritionist and a physician. And if we are not able to make steady progress in the renourishing, there's not that much that I can do. I don't have a magic wand to sort of overcome that. Now, once the brain starts renourishing, even if little bit, right, then I can certainly start giving you tools how to manage it. And so is the nutritionist, right? They're managing the nutrition part. So I work a lot with dialectical behavioral therapy, which then helps you to with things like distress tolerance and emotion regulation, right? So that these obstacles that you're encountering, right? In a nutshell, it comes down to feel the fear and do it anyways. This is going to be scary, and you still have to put your recovery first, no matter what. easier said than done, right? But so it's baby steps. But if we cannot renourish the brain, if we cannot make any traction there, it's going to be hard. I do try to tap into, and as you said, right, you were like, something brought you to treatment. So I'm curious, what did bring you there, though?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a choice. I got under the Mental Health Act in Canada. I got a phone call. It's like either you go or the police are taking you. Which one do you want?
Okay.
You got one. You got half an hour.
Okay. Okay. What happened after that?
I got checked into the local hospital here.
Mm-hmm.
Set an emergency for 3 days.
Okay.
Got put on a ward. I call it baby psych, not full psych, but baby psych.
Uh-huh.
With my roommate was 94 years old with dementia. I was on a ward with dementia people. Like I was the same person in there. Like that says a lot, right? But I was the less of their problems. And then I got a feeding tube and hooked up to every machine known to man.
Okay. And where did you go from there? Outpatient or?
Nope. Got sent home. Was there 1 month.
Okay. Okay. Did they refeed you successfully on the tube?
They say so. Yes, sure.
Okay.
and I was getting like little bits of food because I was sick, right? I'm 5'10". I was 84 pounds. Like I was sick.
Yeah.
And so most of the time I was there, except for one day, I was on that feeding tube.
Okay. Yeah.
Along with little bits of food. And then I was there 1 month. They said, you're going to go to this program here in my city. And I got a phone call while in the hospital. And they called me in February. I left in July.
Okay.
So that didn't work, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's a hard battle especially if you're doing it on outpatient basis. And again, many people can't. It just is not possible. It's not enough support to do it. I will say that when folks come to me with, let's say, binge eating disorder or bulimia, oftentimes they're sort of sick and tired of being sick and tired. So there is a different motivation for change. But even folks on the more restrictive end of things will often say, I am so tired of my life evolving around food nonstop. That's all I think about, right? When I'm eating, what's the next meal gonna be? How I cannot go out with my friends because God forbid I had to look at the menu and I will not know what is on the menu, right? So I think you still can unpack other motivators. They may be a little bit different for these different disorders, right? But it oftentimes is social isolation. It is the mental preoccupation and fatigue of always thinking about food. That's what we grab onto early on. And then, like I said, I do, values work, and the person that you want to be, and are you showing up as that person? It's part of my course, actually. And that's what we, when the person is more ambivalent, right? The voices come back and forth, right? And they're arguing, and some days you're stronger than the voice and sometimes not. And in fact, sometimes when you resist, the voice gets all the louder. We gotta hang on to, I gotta keep showing up in my values. I said I will be this person, and right now I'm scared or I'm overwhelmed and I'm distressed, and I will still take one step toward recovery.
Yeah, and I love how you say that, because you got to feel to heal, which sucks. Sucks. And it's such a long, complicated road, and you already are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
But at one point, I used to think, well, just dance with the devil, right?
And right, that's actually absolutely, and that's what makes recovery often harder, because it's hard to, so in recovery, right, aside from teaching folks distress tolerance, emotional regulation, stuff like that, we also are doing interpersonal effectiveness and the way that you can now communicate effectively without using the eating disorder to do that, but also redeveloping new identity, right? I literally will have clients who will be like, now without the eating disorder, as I'm recovering, I don't know who I am, what I really enjoy, what makes my heart sing, right? And so we go really back to basics, and sort of, I might send someone to, a coffee shop or this, and then we literally rank, how was that experience? Was it a 5? Was it a 6? Do you want to try it again? Those are just small bits and pieces that eventually happen in recovery as well, but it's really rebuilding, rediscovering, and it's, you might be putting trust and hope in your providers, right? Because you can't see it. It's like, you want to let go of the shore, but you're like, there's a big ocean here, and I do not know what happens out there. I mean, I'd rather just stick here. I mean, it kind of sucks here. There's nothing here, but also I don't know what's over there. And so, I mean, I have even heard clients say, I just kind of had to trust you that what you're telling me is true, that there is a better life out there. And sort of it's a gamble. Yeah.
You got to jump.
Yeah.
And there is a safety net. There is. Just when you're falling through the sky, you're kind of contemplating, what did I do that for? Right?
Well, and hopefully, right, we as providers are going to get you. And but it's scary.
So we're talking about taking the leap for recovery. Mm-hmm. Can we talk relapse though? Because that is a big...
It's a real thing, for sure. For sure. I talk relapse a lot with my parents, right? Caregivers especially, because still treatment centers, treatment providers still set recovery goals way too low. And when they do, that relapse happens a lot faster. It just may take you sick, right? You have a flu and you start sliding so quickly. So I definitely like to do, if it entails weight restoration, definitely go above at least 10% more, so that there is a cushion. You have a little bit of a leverage and a leeway, right? So we are not, but many of my clients also, for time being, right, have figured out where to be sort of just on the line, just to do just enough. But that is a tiring balance, right? And I mean, that's the main thing, right? Like if that brain is renourished, it will know once it starts sliding. Like there's no, like, I suppose if you're really on the edge, that sliding is really quick. But the people that have restored and are above that kind of know when they start sliding. They know when their behaviors are coming in, when the eating disorder voice is louder again, right? And so it takes radical honesty to say that. And, to be able to hold you accountable and say, listen, so let me also say, relapse is part of the process. We learn a ton of information when relapse happen. And again, it's nobody's sort of personal failure, nothing like that. And we can plan for it. We know exactly sort of what behaviors, what language to look for, we can totally gain track back and get back on the right track. Yeah.
Well, and it's so hard. I always say my medicine's my kryptonite, right? I'm not kicking drugs. You don't need drugs. I don't need alcohol. Yeah. I need food. Yeah, and yet, there's people who, and again, I'm on social media and they're like, come eat with me and through eating disorder recovery. And I'm like, no, right? I'm like, this is like my fear. And I give them a lot of credit for doing that. But trying to explain to someone that you're scared of food is shameful. Sure. I'll be honest, right? Sure. Like I sound insane, right? How do you encourage people to own? I always say own it. Like just say it.
Yeah, I'm curious. Have you tried to say that to people that you trust?
Oh, me? Yeah, no, I have no problems. Yeah, right? Like, and I had a really nice doctor in the hospital, right? And I've done a lot of inner work and everything to get to where I am now in recovery, right? So, I mean, I used to go to the grocery store and cry. I talk about it all the time. I would have panic attacks.
Overwhelming. Of course, it's overwhelming.
It's, I'd rather run through fire.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, but that voice, when we're talking relapse, right? Yeah. It's not just like you wake up one day, you're like, oh, screw it. It's building blocks, right? A little bit more.
Power.
So,
yeah,
what would you? Sorry,
I'm sorry. It's interesting because some of my clients will, and I talked about this. Whose podcast was I on? I think Behind the Bite or something like that. And we talked about it and how so many of my clients often think like, my roommates don't know about this and I cannot share with them, but people know, right? And the fact, like if you were to share, like I'm scared actually to eat food with you, it's not going to be news to them, but then they can support you.
Yeah.
Right. So that's that first step in accountability, is actually being vulnerable and saying what it is, calling out what it is, because they can't help you. If you keep thinking that they don't see it, that there's a problem, right, you're going to continue to be stuck.
Yep.
Say it out loud. Say it out loud. And I think that people who really can support us don't need to even understand. I mean, listen, there's literature. They can do their work if they want to. They
Mm-hmm.
can read Life Without Ed if they really want to understand. But I'm also convinced that if I tell you I'm scared to eat, I don't even know that they have to understand, right?
Yeah.
I can just say, this is what would really help. I'm scared. This is what would help me. I may try to wiggle out of our lunch date. Please don't let me. Now, our friends shouldn't become our therapists, right? So also
Right.
hopefully working on that in therapy, exposing yourself to meals and foods with a nutritionist, stuff like that. But I just find this paradox of like trying to hide it when it's like obvious to everyone, because they can see your behaviors, they can see that you're never coming to their, for their invitation, whatever. Speak it, say it out loud.
Yeah, I will say, like me, everyone knew, right? But when I opened up, when I came out and sat with people, I will say when I started real recovery in December, almost like January 1st, 2022, that is when or pardon me, 2023, that's where I think everything changed,
Yeah,
right?
say
Like,
more.
well, just because I was like, I can't do this no more. So I locked myself in my bedroom and didn't come out.
Yeah.
That's what I did. Old school. Shut. I went in there, say January 1st. I didn't come out till April.
Mm-hmm. What did you
I
hope
did.
for when you did that?
That, what would I knew something needed to change. I couldn't walk up my stairs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I was scared. I wasn't sleeping. I was cold all the time. I was sweating.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no photos, I have a good 2-year gap where I don't remember anything.
Yeah, which is also common. Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you're saying, yeah, trying to talk to someone with a malnourished brain, yeah, no, you'll have a better conversation with the wall. Right. And so true. And I just thought, if I stay here, because I don't want to go back to the hospital, there's no way. I can do this, but I just need to figure it out. So I watched a lot of YouTube. I got a Tabitha Farr's book, Rehabilitate, Rewire, Recover, which I call my Bible, and just found who I call guides. I've tried to talk to the people who went through this and got on the other side. And I thought, clearly my brain's broken. It's not working. If this is what they're saying, I trust that there is something on the other side. There's got to be.
And it worked for you.
It did work. It did work. And then eventually I got into the program that I needed to get into. And then I did a bunch of group therapies, and then I got a really great therapist.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, I mean, it's going to be a lifelong, right?
It can be. So I know that is such a hot topic and conversation, and people have different beliefs about whether full recovery is possible. I'm one of those people that believes that full recovery is possible, but I will say it with a caveat. I have had plenty of clients who recovered fully. They don't think about food. They have even forgotten. I mean, I think that you never will think that, a yogurt has 5,000 calories, but they have forgotten the exact metrics. And, the further out in recovery, they're just forgetting. They live their life. They're just focused on other things, not food, not body image. But I will say with a caveat, right? Anorexia, we know, is a biologically based disorder. We know it's a metabolic disorder. And so people respond differently to negative energy balance. Some people will go on diets and they just kind of yo-yo diet, or they let it go, whatever. For some people, it leads to disorders like anorexia, right? Someone like that. And even with ARFID, I mean, if you were, and there are different causes for ARFID, but one of them being for folks who have never really been interested in food. Food was really never sort of like They like eat it, right? It's like gasoline in your car, but they don't care about it. They don't really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So it's very mechanical. And so for some folks, for the rest of their life, they have to be aware. I cannot play with negative energy balance. They might still live pretty well in recovery, but I just have to be more cognizant. Like, I'm one of those people who cannot play with that fire, right?
Yeah.
Like I cannot, there may be periods of stress in your life where that could happen, where you're like not paying attention. So that's my caveat for that. But I also believe in full recovery for many folks. Yeah.
I agree. I do agree. I also know where, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this though. I know where my anorexia bulimia came from. I was in a horrible workplace accident. My life spun on a dime. And because of that, I got inner ear and concussion, vertigo, tinnitus, sicker than a dog. That's no eating disorder at all. And it then had to deal with all that, the company, other stuff, still dealing with it 8 years later, not done. And it started something, and then it became like a coping mechanism. Yeah. Because I'm one of those people. I'm high strung, in case you can't tell. And I just get very worked up. Like my back starts to sweat. I am not the person to take to Disneyland, like at all. I have a weak stomach. I don't go on swings, right? And I get physically ill. And then it just couldn't stop. And then here we are. Right. I know that. Yeah. It's taken a lot of therapy to know I can fix so much. That part, if that could get done, oh, yay. But I have to do so much work to keep this hanging around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But do you see that a lot of people with PTSD or some big event in their life comes to you and triggered?
Yeah, I certainly seen that even in my own family, that trauma can be a trigger. I think that when you look at siblings, right, even if they were through the same trauma, they will respond differently. And I think that's still a testament to our temperament and how we are biologically wired, even within families. How is it that you and I could be through the same darn trauma, the same darn family, and I may go without an eating disorder, or maybe I develop bulimia, you develop anorexia, right? Like, how is that possible? So yeah, I always say it's nature and nurture, right? So genetics, all this biological stuff, and certainly your environment, but definitely trauma can be a big piece. But again, right, based on our biological makeup and our temperament is also how we then navigate the same trauma, right?
Yeah.
So what do they say? It's like maybe the genetics or the environment loads the gun, and then whatever pulls the trigger. Some of that can be here as well. And it's no secret, right? Like I always say, like my eating disorder clients are some of the most talented, creative, brilliant people. Often prone to perfectionism, sometimes anxiety disorders, OCD, right? So again, there's some predispositions where it becomes the perfect storm.
Yeah. And it is so true, because anyone can grow up in a house. Some kids get drug issues, others don't. Like everyone has, I don't know, some sort of something that happens, right?
Yeah.
But I always say, and I don't know if you want to share about this, but like victim mentality. I do see a lot of people, and I don't like that mentality. I never want someone to think, no, like I'm not playing victim, and I don't want to use this as a crutch. I guess that's a better word to use, using their illness as a crutch.
That's
because
very interesting. That's very interesting. Say more. I mean, that's intriguing. Do you want to say more about that? Sort of
what, using their illness as a crutch?
Reaction to some people using it as a crutch?
Yeah, I just don't have time for bullshit. Okay. It's not in me, right? Like, no, like own it. Just own what you got. So either you want to stay there, which is fine. I don't care what you do. It doesn't affect my life.
Right.
But don't use it as, well, I can't do this because I have a drug issue, alcoholism, an eating disorder. I just see a lot. Sometimes people just want to sit in the shit and they like it there.
Yeah. Gosh, we could really be here for hours, I promise, on that. Sometimes it is, like you said, it's the devil that we know, right? It's the safety. Even though to the outside world, this may not seem like the safe place to be, it may feel like the safe place to be to you, right? And so I also do some work in the internal family systems, or IFS, and sort of, IFS talks about, right, these protectors that we have, either managers, there are the sort of the like the Polish guys, like the sort of the well, we're gonna do this, we're gonna look perfect, we're gonna look shiny to the world, blah blah blah. And then you have firefighters, and they are also protectors, but they're a lot more destructive, like, I told you we're not gonna do this. And it's like, firefighters, when they go into fire, right, they're not worrying about breaking some grandma's vase, they're just going in to protect you. And so these protectors do come in here, right, and sort of have a lot of a big role in what we hang on to and what we sit in, because what's the alternative? I'm not going to go into the whole theoretical underpinning of this approach, but it makes sense to me that some people might sit in that, even if it's ambivalence, right? Ambivalence is such a common piece with eating disorders, that one was saying, nope, you're not eating again, we're not going to do that, right? And then you have this pull to want to recover, because that eating disorder stands in the way of connection. So these protectors often stay in the way of connection, right? And let's face it, when you're isolated in your eating disorder, you're not connecting with people. And we go on and on and on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I know. Yeah, right. So one last question, one that I see a lot is, and this has to do with like teenagers. I live with my parents, and I guess it's a two-part question. Either the parents they say, oh, my parents don't believe me that I'm sick. And I live with a parent who has an eating disorder. How am I supposed to recover?
Yeah. Dang. Important questions. I'm going to actually start maybe with the second one. Because we have talked about how hard recovery is, how putting one foot in front of the other toward recovery day in and day out is already hard. And then you have these distractions, right? Yeah. And we can distract ourselves, actually, honestly, whether that parent has an eating disorder or not, because I could start comparing my plate to yours, and yet I don't know anything about your life. I don't know what your caloric needs are, yada, yada. So it is always flawed, right? And so the really simplified answer here is you got to put blinders on, and you got to stay in your lane, and you got to focus on your recovery. Now, when it's a child or a teen living with a caregiver who cannot provide for them, that's a different story, right? Like what I said just a minute ago is a lot easier perhaps when you're an adult, and we're talking about your sorority sisters, right? Perhaps you can put blinders on and really live your life. When it's your parent or a caregiver, that is a tough one. I would say to a teen or child like that, can you seek other supports? Listen, if it got really neglectful, it might be the case for CPS, right? Child Protective Services. Not using that lightly at all.
Yeah, no, I know.
But if it comes to like, I can't, no one is taking care of me, when it's neglect, it's a more complicated story. I mean, obviously we want, and I say this as a parent myself, right? Like we gotta do our work so that we, even if you're just anxious about your kid crossing the street, I'm gonna manage my own anxiety. I cannot always stop my kid from crossing the street, right? It's the same thing here. Addiction, eating disorders, we gotta do our work in order for our kids to be healthy. And still, it's not gonna be perfect. Our kids may still be predisposed, and we also are not perfect, yada, yada. But your first question was, now it escaped me what the first question was. So the second one was, right, what if my parent has an eating disorder? What happened?
Oh, some people say my parents are in denial. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. In denial that they're sick.
That they're sick themselves, or the kid is sick?
Both.
Right. So this whole podcast was about how easy it is to be in denial, anosognosia or other elements. So that's a tough one. Again, it's all about renourishing. It's about therapy. if the parent is denial about the kid, I mean, sooner or later, unfortunately, it will become much more clear. And, it is, I feel for parents, because sometimes you may just look at your kid and say, well, it's just like picky eating. All kids are kind of picky, right? But before you know it, now it's a lot more evolved. And sometimes it unfortunately does take more severe stages before we are like, oh crap, now we're really deep in this. Listen, I have a lot of compassion for parents and caregivers. We cannot know everything about everything. I often hear it like, when are things sort of subclinical, when it's perfectionism, where it's OCD, the parent is not a clinician. How should they know? How should they know to ask the really subtle questions that really crack the code, right? On the other hand, I have seen some extremes. I have had one particular client comes to my mind where, she had a broken leg and the family didn't believe it. I mean, it took several days of this kid with a broken leg before the family took her to an x-ray. So unfortunately, there are all kinds of family dynamics as adults, right? I can teach you interpersonal skills and get what you want, ask for what you need, all of these things. It's much harder with children, obviously, with adults. And quite frankly, when we do, like if you do dialectical behavioral therapy for teens, the parents have to do it as well. So everyone is learning skills, right? It's often about really invalidating, albeit sometimes very unintentionally. But that's a tough one. I mean, and I do believe, right, that there's a lot to be said about an eating disorder being sort of the last scream. Like, can't you see I'm really sick? Like, hear me out, right? I have heard clients say that's sort of how their eating disorder came about early on, or some of the messaging that was there. It's much easier for us in adulthood to re-nourish the brain and teach effective interpersonal skills. I would just say seek supports where people will hear you.
Well, I can't thank you. Oh man, I could talk to you for hours. You're amazing. You're amazing.
There's so much to be said. Yeah.
Right. Like, and so let's give a huge shout out to you, and it's Lotus, right?
Yeah. So my practice in Ann Arbor is Lotus Consulting. And, if people ever want to check out the course, it's just ilanaphillips.com.
And they can do this online.
Yeah, that one is an online course. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming. Oh my God. I can't thank you enough.
You're very welcome. We have, thank you for doing this work. We have long ways to go, but we're making progress, and that's all we can do.
Right. 1% better every day.
There you go. Yeah.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.